All right, who's ready to nerd out over some kindergarten math curriculum? Today I'm going to be taking you on a thorough flip through of Kindergarten Math with Confidence. I'll show you the teacher's guide, the student book, and I'll tell you what else you really need to use this program. And I'll talk a little bit about how I'm using it with my own son, who really loves math, and if you can't tell by the fact that there's a bunch of price tags all over all my bookshelves right now, because he turned them into a store, and it's a very expensive store. Let's get started. Let's start with the teacher guide, and this is not one of those kindergarten math curriculums where you can skip the teacher's guide. That's actually more true than you would expect about a lot of early math curriculums. Quite a bit of the teaching is not in the workbook, it's actually in the teacher's guide. There is front matter, which I highly recommend you always read. They tell you what exactly you're going to need to create your own math box to go with the curriculum. They also give you some alternate options. There are printable options for some of the manipulatives in the back of the book, but I'll show you what I did. You're supposed to use pattern blocks for some activities. I grabbed the pattern blocks, wooden pattern blocks that my mom had. This is the type of manipulative that I feel is usually pretty easy to find, pretty inexpensively, or as a hand-me-down. I also have a box here with the other manipulatives we'll be using. We have play money. I have a variety of counters. I also have Math-U-See blocks as well that we can use if we need larger quantities of counters, but we even have spiders here to use as counters. And I have some of the index card number cards that we made for preschool math at home, which comes before kindergarten. But those are the manipulatives we're using. We will also need to continue to make more index card type number cards or price tags and so on. So index cards are also something you use throughout, and just household items. All right, every unit begins with an intro, and then every week has an intro page as well. In the intro page, they teach a little bit about why the topic that you're practicing is so important. They talk about weaving math into everyday life, give you some ideas for that, and they also tell you what the math book of the week is. So the math book of the week was one of the things that really drew me to this curriculum. And she has a list on her website of 30 math books for your kindergartner. Now, you do not have to buy all of those. Probably most people won't at all, but I did want to buy a few that I could find for pretty reasonable prices, because we don't have a great library access, and the picture books were something that really drew me to the curriculum because my son loves books, and he loves books about numbers. So I did buy a few. We have the 10 Black Dots by Donald Cruz. I got a Spanish edition for that. We have How Many Feet in the Bed. I did try to choose books that kind of touched on different topics, so we didn't get a ton of counting books or a ton of books about addition. We kind of tried to tackle some of the different major topics in the year. The action of subtraction, when a line bends, a shape begins. It's hard to see the title, but What Time Is It, Mr. Crocodile? So a time book, and actual size. Oh, and the year at Maple Hill Farm. So these are just a small handful of the books recommended. For those books that we weren't able to get, I will try to do YouTube read-alouds for those, which is always a great option, although I do like having the actual book when we can. Then you have your lesson, and in the lesson, they usually start with some kind of activity, which might be a quick review type game. Then there'll be the teaching activity after that, and then you end it with your workbook page. So I'm just going to show you a few examples of the different lessons. This is here at the beginning of the book. As you progress through the book, it's going to look a little bit different. So we have our review and warm-up, then we have our teaching activity, then we have our workbook. So I'll walk you through one lesson a couple weeks in to kind of give you an example of what would happen in a lesson. There's a review and a warm-up activity where you're placing counters on a 10 frame, covering up with a piece of paper. You show your child the counters for just a second, and they are supposed to tell you how many counters there are as fast as they can. And this is because in previous weeks they've been working on subitizing, and they've been working on strategies for being able to know how many counters are on a 10 frame. Then the teaching activity in this lesson is talking about sorting. And you get to use everyday utensils, writing utensils, to sort in different ways. Sorting by color, sorting by type. Then we do another activity, which is which one doesn't belong. So you can tell there's a script for the parent to read. There's an activity, something you are doing with your child for a very short lesson, and then you end it with a quick workbook page. And I will show you the workbook. For the workbook, I took the old school strategy of tearing it apart and putting it in a binder. This is something that homeschoolers used to do back in the day when I was being homeschooled, because it means your child can use a dry erase marker on it and you can reuse it with their younger siblings when the time comes. The reason I did this is, this is a very affordable curriculum. You can usually find packages of the teacher guide and the workbook on sale on Amazon. I feel like they fairly frequently have sales on Amazon, and about maybe twice a year, the Well-Trained Mind will have a pretty good sale on this. So if you look out for sales, you can even get an even better deal, but it is very affordable for a math curriculum. So if you, if you want to, you definitely can just rebuy the workbook for each child. But because we live overseas, it's a little iffy when we'll be able to get new books sometimes, and it can be very costly. So I just decided, with how little writing there was in the workbook, I decided for this level, I would just go ahead and put it in a binder. I can reuse it with my other son. There really is very little writing. So just one of these is all they do in the workbook each day. This can be one of the, in some ways, problems people have when they look at kindergarten math with confidence, because they look at the workbook and they feel that's not enough, that's hardly anything. And it's true, in the workbook there's very, very little work, but I still find this to be an incredibly solid math program, because the teaching activities that you are doing and the number conversations, math conversations that you are having with your kid through the teacher guide script are incredible. They are very, very deep. So we get about one page for every lesson throughout the year. Just give you a quick glimpse at what you can expect. I will say I am using this with my 4-year-old, who is, I'm considering him in pre-K, not in kindergarten. He is a math-loving 4-year-old, and not like, I wouldn't say particularly advanced, but this isn't, as far as the concepts covered, it's not the most advanced topics that you'll see in a kindergarten curriculum. There are definitely curriculums like The Good and the Beautiful that will tackle much higher levels of concepts, but I would say that this goes very deep. It goes very deep into the concepts that it teaches, and it teaches an excellently strong foundation of these concepts. So the lessons are short, but they do require you to sit down with your child, talk with your child, have some real life things that you're using, and have conversations and activities with your kid. There are sometimes very surprisingly deep number concepts being covered. So I don't think that people should discount it when they look at the workbook and say, oh, that's not enough. Once you have the teacher's guide and you're actually doing everything in the teacher's guide, when you're reading these math storybooks, when you're doing the activities with the manipulatives, it really all comes together, and is really, I'm finding it, I'm very impressed with this. I've seen a lot of math curriculums for kindergarten, and I'm very much impressed with this one, with the variety and the depth of it. If you have any questions about it, definitely leave me comments, and I'll be happy to try to answer your questions. I will also leave a link to the curriculum in my description down below. Thanks so much for taking the time to watch. If you appreciate nerdy homeschool videos like this, leave me a thumbs up, leave me a comment, and subscribe for more. I make these kind of videos all the time. See you later. Bye.